Hello. In this video, we'll be going over a few Spider-Man theories you can listen to when falling asleep. If you come to enjoy this video, please don't forget to subscribe. Theory number 1. Venom's true origins and intentions. The tale of the symbiote's arrival begins with whispers in the dark corners of the universe, where ancient forces stir in the void, in the murky recesses of space. A being was born, a creature unlike any other, both seductive and sinister, destined to leave an indelible mark on the life of a young man who would one day swing between skyscrapers. Long before that fateful encounter, legends had spoken of interstellar wanderers that preyed on emotions and life itself. It was said that these creatures were drawn to the vibrant, raw energies of living beings, and this particular symbiote was no exception. Its story, dark and multifaceted, would eventually intertwine with that of a neighborhood kid named Peter Parker, whose life was about to change in ways he could scarcely imagine. In the bustling heartbeat of New York City, beneath the glimmering lights and the ceaseless hum of urban life, Peter Parker lived a life that oscillated between brilliance and vulnerability. He was a young man grappling with the trials of growing up, a blend of superhero dreams and everyday struggles. It was during one of his many challenging nights that the symbiote made its silent approach, weaving through the city's grimy underbelly, until it found its perfect host in Peter. The encounter did not scream of calamity at first, but instead it started with subtle changes. A fleeting whisper in his mind, an urge to test limits that he had never known existed, and surprisingly, a newfound confidence that seemed almost otherworldly. Peter's initial discovery of the symbiote was mundane, a late night after a strenuous day of balancing school, science experiments, and the budding responsibilities of a budding photographer. He found himself inexplicably drawn to an abandoned lot on the fringes of a derelict part of town. There, under the cover of night, the symbiote reached out like a sentient shadow. Its presence was overwhelming, without being overtly menacing, a warm, almost comforting tingle that belied its true nature. In that moment, as the creature merged with Peter, a pact was unwittingly forged between human hope and alien hunger. For weeks, Peter noticed that his strength, agility, and intelligence amplified in ways he could not fathom. Yet, behind these miraculous enhancements lurked a darker change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the symbiote began to mold Peter's personality. Where once he had been cautious and kind, there now stirred an undercurrent of recklessness and defiance. The difference was subtle, almost like the gentle strumming of an underlying chord before a crescendo swells. Peter's eyes began to glint with an unfamiliar intensity every time he donned his new suit, and in those moments, it was as though the suit itself whispered secrets of power and dominance. The symbiote's true intentions emerged gradually, a malignant destiny shrouded in mystery and veiled by benevolent miracles. Although it seemed to grant Peter abilities that were beyond human, its gifts were far from altruistic. It was as if the symbiote saw human frailty as a playground for its ambitions. It fed not only on Peter's physical energy but also on his internal desires, subtly amplifying the darker facets of his personality. The relentless search for strength and recognition, which had always simmered beneath his unassuming exterior, was now being fed by a beast that thrived on chaos and control. Not long after its first union with Peter, the symbiote embarked on a series of experiments with various hosts across the cosmos, and its pattern of behavior began to reveal itself. In its next significant pairing, the creature found a host named Eddie Brock. Eddie, a man whose life had been marred by failure and personal tragedy, was a stark contrast to Peter. His persona was tainted by bitterness and unchecked aggression, and it did not take long for the symbiote to adapt to Eddie's darker sentiment. Unlike with Peter, where the creature's influence was more subtle and gradually manipulative, Eddie's union with the symbiote unleashed a tempest of malevolence almost immediately. The pair became an inseparable force, their symbiosis marked by turbulent emotions and a thirst for vengeance that bordered on the uncontrollable. Observers would later remark on the eerie similarities between the behavior of the symbiote-infused Peter and Eddie's painful transformation, noting that the creature's growing appetite for control was less about empowerment and more about dominating its host's inherent weaknesses. Peter's early experiences with the symbiote were fraught with both exhilarating power and a creeping loss of control. Initially, the changes were subtle, a little extra adrenaline in a fight, a slightly sharper intuition when danger loomed. But as days turned into weeks, the influence grew stronger. In the dead of night, when the city was asleep, Peter found himself drawn to the rooftops, where the desires seated deep within him found fertile ground. His nightly escapades became less about heroism and more a test of physical limits. a dance with danger that he no longer fully understood. Friends and allies began to note a different quality in his eyes. There was a spark that went beyond youthful exuberance, a flickering flame fueled by the sinister whisperings of the symbiote. The transformation was not instantaneous, but rather a gradual unraveling of Peter's own moral tapestry. He would often find himself in situations where the choices between right and wrong blurred. It was as though the symbiote was rewriting his internal code, urging him to disregard caution in favor of a more aggressive, almost primal form of retribution. The once altruistic and responsible Peter began to favor impulsive battles, seeking thrill over strategy, often leaving behind traces of collateral damage that he would hastily try to cover up with witty retorts and clever escapes. And while these actions began to redraw his reputation in the public eye, the undercurrent of darkness was harder for him to see, until it reverberated in moments of personal loss and regret. Amidst these internal battles, Peter's interactions with seasoned figures in his life played a crucial role in highlighting the growing influence of the symbiote. His mentor, a grizzled veteran of both physical and philosophical combat, would often remind him of the importance of balance between strength and responsibility. But every time Peter recalled these words, the lurking shadow of the symbiote seemed to murmur in the background. Embrace your power no matter the cost. The mentor's warnings evolved from cautionary tales into echoes of a past life when Peter's heroic intentions were unclouded by ambition or hubris. With every mission and every encounter, the symbiote insidiously nudged Peter's decisions, creating situations where the line between righteous fury and destructive savagery became increasingly blurred. In one particularly gripping chapter, Peter found himself pitted against a dangerous criminal mastermind whose cunning was matched only by a ruthless desire for control. The battle waged in the city's darkest alleys and desolate industrial zones was not a simple contest of strength versus intellect. It quickly morphed into an internal conflict, with the symbiote urging Peter to unleash a torrent of violence that even his own conscience recoiled from. Amid the cacophony of sirens and the echo of shattered glass, Peter's struggle was twofold: fighting an external enemy and a specter that whispered venom into his very soul. Every blow he dealt was mirrored by an internal war, a tug-of-war between the noble ideals he had once held dear and the seductive allure of unbridled power that the symbiote championed. The transformation in Peter was mirrored in the shifts observed in Eddie Brock, his eventual counterpart and the harbinger of a darker narrative. Eddie's life was already steeped in shadows. His inner demons had always clawed at his sanity, until the moment the symbiote made its fateful return. Unlike Peter's initial tentative exploration of his newfound strength, Eddie's union was cataclysmic. In a chilling series of events, Eddie embraced the symbiote with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. The symbiote, recognizing the raw intensity of Eddie's hatred and despair, quickly established a direct conduit to his most destructive impulses. The transformation was swift and brutal. Where once Eddie had been a man overshadowed by his own misfortunes, he became a vessel for vengeance, his every act dripping with a dark, unyielding determination to destroy those he deemed responsible for his suffering. The patterns that emerged from these dual journeys revealed much about the nature of the symbiote. It was not simply a parasite seeking hosts to augment physical prowess. Instead, it operated as an agent of chaos, targeting the vulnerabilities and unfulfilled desires of those it bonded with. In a disconcerting twist, the creature seemed to instinctively gravitate toward individuals whose deepest, often hidden yearnings resonated with its own malevolent purpose. Peter's battles were as much internal as they were external, a slow, creeping dominance that seeped into every decision and colored every interaction with an undercurrent of a darker agenda. Meanwhile, Eddie's metamorphosis served as a stark illustration of what happens when raw negativity and unbridled ambition find a perfect match in a being that thrives on the same destructive energies. As the symbiote continued to reveal the darker aspects of its true intentions, the stories from across time and space began to stack up like pages in an ancient grimoire. Each host, whether a beacon of hope like Peter or a well of internal strife like Eddie, contributed another chapter to the unfolding myth. The tales of forgotten hosts and near-forgotten encounters began to surface. Whispered legends spoke of a long-lost civilization that once revered these creatures as manifestations of nature's unchecked chaos. In those old scrolls and hidden repositories of lore, the symbiote was less a creature of malevolence and more an emissary of primordial instinct, a reminder that power in its rawest form was never meant to be tamed or controlled. This ancient perspective added a layer of tragic inevitability to the narrative, as if the universe itself had conspired to ensure that every encounter with the symbiote would culminate in a battle between will and fate. The symbiote's malevolent agenda was not simply to enhance or empower, it was to invoke an internal struggle in every host, a challenge to their very core. The more capable the host, the grander the internal conflict became, culminating in an eventual showdown between the host's nobility and the relentless, consuming desires of the symbiote. Even as Peter grappled with the seductive call of unchecked power, the symbiote's influence gnawed at the edges of his consciousness, forever altering the path that his destiny would follow. In one of the more intimate and soul-searching moments of this unfolding drama, Peter found himself alone in the empty quiet of a high-rise rooftop at dawn. The city lay sprawled beneath him like a canvas of possibility and regret. In that silent, reflective moment, he recalled the early days when his heart had been full of untainted idealism and a pure desire to help those in need. Now the memory was tainted by the aftertaste of every reckless decision driven by the insidious whispers of the symbiote. As morning light crept over the horizon, Peter could almost see the ghostly form of the creature lurking in the shadows behind him, a constant reminder of the internal battle he would never fully win. The juxtaposition of the city's awakening against the backdrop of his own tumultuous soul created a poignant allegory, a reminder that even heroes are not immune to the seduction of their darker impulses. In parallel, Eddie's story unfolded with a furious intensity that few could ignore. His transformation into a being of raw, unyielding aggression was like watching a storm from its inception to its destructive climax. Eddie's life had always been a series of misfortunes, and so when the symbiote came calling, it was as though every setback, every painful memory was answered by a surge of vindictive energy unleashed from deep within. As Eddie roamed the city with a newfound, almost jubilant malevolence, his actions were punctuated by a series of grim, almost poetic confrontations with those he held responsible for his downward spiral. The symbiote, acting as both muse and executioner, turned each encounter into a dark ballet, a dance of chaos that left devastation in its wake. In the fiery crucible of Eddie's vendettas, the symbiote's true purpose emerged with startling clarity to serve as a dark mirror reflecting the host's innermost demons, magnifying them until they could no longer be contained. For Peter, the internal conflict was less overtly violent, yet just as devastating in its impact. Every encounter Peter had with danger, every time he risked life and limb to stand against the forces of evil, the symbiote nudged him ever closer to a precipice. There were nights when he would pace alone in his room, the silence punctuated by the whispered promises of endless power if only he would relinquish control. These were moments of quiet desperation, where each heartbeat seemed synchronized with the creeping tendrils of the symbiote's influence. The city's romanticized image of the hero began to warp under the weight of these darker inspirations. It was as though Peter was slowly losing himself in the vortex of his own potential for destruction, a man chasing glory while the monster within feasted on every shred of his moral resolve. Yet, even as the symbiote's influence grew, a part of Peter clung desperately to the memory of who he had once been. In the reflective pulls of his quieter moments, he recalled the lessons instilled by those who had guided him, even as the allure of uncontrollable power beckoned him forward. Like a mythic hero battling his inner demons, Peter wrestled with the duality of his existence. The internal war was not one of right versus wrong, but rather a clash between two equally potent forces, a beacon of youthful hope on one side and a voracious ancient hunger on the other. Each pulse of energy was a stark reminder of the stakes involved, and each battle fought, whether in the streets or within the corridors of his own heart, came with consequences that rippled far beyond a single moment in time. The city, unaware of the cosmic interplay taking place within one of its most beloved figures, continued its relentless pulse of life. In its every heartbeat, the story of the symbiote's dark influence was written in invisible ink, etched in alleys, memorialized in whispers, and chronicled in the collective anxieties of a populace suddenly aware of the monsters lurking both outside and within. As Peter swung through the urban jungle, he became a living paradox, a figure of immense strength whose greatest challenge was the capacity for destruction that lay dormant within him. His every encounter with danger was a microcosm of the broader struggle between man and the unseen forces that coveted his inner light, seeking to snuff it out and replace it with an eternal corrosive night. Over time, the symbiote's origins began to fascinate scholars and cosmic historians alike. Ancient texts unearthed from forgotten corners of the galaxy spoke of entities that fed on the essence of life, on the very emotions that make beings both mortal and beautifully unpredictable. These texts recounted parables of cosmic balance, where great power was inextricably linked with great risk. In the retelling of these ancient narratives, the story of the symbiote was elevated to near mythic status, a reminder that not all that glitters with the promise of power is benevolent. Every legend, every fable, held a kernel of truth about the creature's purpose: to expose the hidden fragilities of its host, to pry open the doors of self-doubt and hubris, and to set loose a torrent of consequences that would echo across dimensions. As these revelations emerged, the symbiote could no longer be seen as a mere accessory to Spider-Man's arsenal. Its presence was no longer a simple quirk of fate or a random encounter in the dark. Instead, it was revealed as a calculated force of nature, one that had long harbored a malignant agenda from the moment it first split apart in the cosmic ocean. The creature had been designed, or so the ancient prophecies hinted, to test the limits of mortal grandeur, forcing each host into a crucible of emotions, desires, and ultimate decisions that would irrevocably alter the tapestry of their existence. The notion that the symbiote was predestined to serve a darker purpose began to take root in the hearts of those who observed its influence, reshaping the very narrative of Spider-Man's journey from a simple chronicle of heroism into a complex layered saga of internal struggle and cosmic irony. There were long nights spent in smoky backrooms of academic hideaways where experts debated fiercely over every nuance of the creature's character. They spoke in hushed tones of the symbiote's duality, comparing it to a double-edged sword that lent its wielder both unparalleled power and an almost inescapable destiny of downfall. One such conversation recalled an ancient tale of a warrior centuries before Peter's time, whose union with a mysterious force led him down a path of glorious victories interlaced with tragic losses. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Just as that warrior had been seduced by the promises of might and invincibility, so too had Peter found himself dancing dangerously close to the flames of his own undoing. Yet, in every retelling of such legends, one line remained unaltered: the greatest battles were fought within. Peter's internal journey was marked by moments of bitter introspection and fierce determination. There were days when the weight of the symbiote's shadow became unbearable, driving him to the brink of despair. It was during these times that he would find solace in memories of his past, a childhood filled with dreams of endless possibilities, a time when the world still gleamed with the pure, untainted light of hope. These flashbacks were as vivid as they were painful. Each recollection served as a reminder of what was at risk: not only his physical well-being, but the very essence of his humanity. In the midst of nighttime battles and chaotic altercations, Peter clung to these moments of clarity, using them as a counterbalance to the overwhelming tide of the symbiote's dark seduction. One unforgettable evening, while the city was cloaked in the heavy silence of a winter storm, Peter found himself locked in a fierce confrontation with a criminal whose brutality was surpassed only by the darkness in his own heart. The exchange was both physical and metaphorical, a struggle where every punch thrown echoed with the strain of a much larger internal battle. As Peter's fists met their target, there was an unmistakable heaviness to each strike, a hesitation born from the knowledge that he too was fighting not just for justice but against the creeping shadow within. Even as his adversary faltered beneath the weight of his renewed resolve, Peter could not shake the feeling that with every victory, a piece of his own soul was slipping further into the depths of the symbiote's influence. The contrast between his encounters with various foes only served to highlight the insidious nature of what had taken hold of him. In quieter moments, when the roar of battle subsided and the night offered no distractions, Peter would find himself in profound solitude, face to face with that internal force that dared to redefine what it meant to be his own master. He questioned each whispered command in the silence, wondering if perhaps the symbiote was not merely an accidental parasite, but a living testament to the darker corners of the universal human condition. It was a troubling realization that his own desire for power, the fleeting thrill of being invincible, might have always been intertwined with this alien presence. The symbiote, it seemed, had been waiting patiently for the opportune moment to reveal that destiny was as much about succumbing to one's desires as it was about rising to heroic challenges. As time passed, Peter began to unearth fragments of ancient lore and cosmic truths that hinted at a deeper, more cosmic plan. There were legends that spoke of celestial entities who wandered the stars, seeding planets with beings that could serve as catalysts for evolution, both physical and spiritual. These tales, transmitted through countless generations, suggested that the symbiote was part of a grand design meant to test the mettle of life. Every trial, every bout of internal strife, was a chance for growth and transformation. But the theory that emerged in hushed conversation shared between those in the know was that the symbiote's true intention was never about balance or the evolution of strength through adversity. It was about seduction into corruption, about twisting the ideals of righteousness into a brutal parody of itself. In a quiet moment of study and introspection at a hidden library in the forgotten quarters of the city, Peter pored over ancient texts that documented encounters with similar entities from a long-forgotten era. These texts, brittle with age and cryptic in their symbolism, described a series of patterns far too consistent to be mere coincidences. The creature that had attached itself to Peter had not been wandering aimlessly across the cosmos. It had been drawn to particular hosts whose hearts beat with a paradoxical blend of hope and inherent despair. These dual qualities acted like a beacon for the creature, a promise of endless possibilities for manipulation and control. Each tale he read was a mirror reflecting the complexity of his own inner turmoil. And with every page turned, the dark lure of the symbiote became more undeniably intertwined with the fabric of his destiny. In retrospect, one of the most harrowing aspects of this journey was the realization that the symbiote's influence had always been a test, a challenge that required more than brute strength to overcome. It was an existential trial, one that forced Peter to confront the paradox of ambition. The desire to be great often comes with the risk of straying into darkness. The symbiote thrived on that very vulnerability, a cunning reminder that every soul contains both the capacity for light and an inherent spark of darkness. Each night, as Peter stood atop a building and surveyed the restless city below, he was forced to ask himself whether he was truly acting out of noble impulse, or if he was merely dancing to a tune composed by that insidious presence lying dormant within him. In these moments of self-doubt, Peter recalled a conversation from long ago, a conversation with a man who had once been a mentor, whose words still echoed in the recesses of his mind. The mentor had once said, "True strength is not measured by the power you wield, but by the doubts you conquer." Those words now rang with a bittersweet irony, for the very doubts he fought against were the seeds planted by the symbiote. They had grown incorrigibly, their roots burrowing deep within the tender soil of his once idealistic soul. Despite the chaotic surge of power and the intoxicating feeling of invincibility, a part of Peter desperately clung to the belief that redemption was never truly out of reach. That belief, however, came with the constant awareness that every action had consequences, that every embrace of power had the risk of further inviting the symbiote's corruption. The saga of the symbiote is ultimately a story of temptation, a narrative that traverses the shadowy divide between the light of heroism and the darkness of unchecked ambition. It is a tale woven through time, marked by countless battles not only fought on the battlegrounds of New York's skyline, but waged silently within the innermost sanctum of the human heart. Each chapter of this unfolding drama is a testament to the power of internal struggle, the eternal conflict between ideals and impulses, between the desire to do good and the seductive lure of attaining greatness at any cost. The symbiote's dark purpose is revealed in the minutiae of its actions, in the subtle ways it amplifies a host's hidden weaknesses, in the choices that lead to irreparable regret, in the relentless pursuit of a power that is as intoxicating as it is destructive. Its story is not one of straightforward villainy or heroic sacrifice. It is a complex tapestry of allegiances, betrayals, inner demons, and the never-ending quest for self-discovery. It has taught both Peter and Eddie, in their divergent paths, an enduring lesson, a lesson about the fragile line that separates the savior from the destroyer. In the depths of their struggles lay the unspoken truth that true heroism is born not out of invulnerability, but out of the courage to face and overcome the darkness within. As our tale draws on, the narrative of the symbiote becomes a mirror reflecting the human condition, a reminder that every heart, no matter how pure, harbors secrets and scars. In Peter's journey, the reader finds a chronicle of transformation, of battles both seen and unseen, of a hero whose path was forever altered by an encounter that was anything but accidental. The merging of the symbiote and its hosts was a moment fraught with implication, forging a bond that could tip fate's scales towards salvation or damnation. It was a communion of energies, one where the creature's own sinister agenda intertwined with the host's deepest ambitions, resulting in a struggle that was as inevitable as it was tragic. In the quiet aftermath of countless confrontations and the steady cadence of days that blurred into nights, Peter began to see that every act of heroism carried with it the risk of self-destruction, a lesson carved into the annals of his life by the relentless influence of the symbiote. The dark side that had been awakened was not merely a byproduct of an alien invasion into his body, but a reflection of the age-old human conflict between desire and duty. It became clear that the symbiote's true intentions were less about bestowing power and more about challenging the very essence of what it meant to be a hero. It was as if the creature's silent directive was to unlock in each host it touched the full spectrum of human potential, a potential that spanned the heights of nobility and the depths of depravity. In recounting these intertwined narratives, one cannot help but marvel at the cosmic irony of fate. The same force that made Peter's heart race with newfound energy also left indelible scars upon his soul. With every swing from one building to another, he was reminded of the delicate balance that all heroes must negotiate. A balance between overwhelming power and the humility to acknowledge its limitations. And in Eddie's desperate quest for retribution, the symbiote's influence manifested in acts of extremism that served as a grim mirror to what Peter might have become if he had allowed the shadow to claim him entirely. The sprawling saga of the symbiote and its hosts continues to evolve, stretching across dimensions and threading its way through the fabric of innumerable lives. To truly understand its dark purpose, one must look not only at the corporeal battles fought on city streets, but also at the internal wars waged in secret, where one's very identity is at stake. Every encounter, every whispered command, emanating in the stillness of the night, speaks of an entity that exists to test the mettle of mortals, to force them to confront the shadow lurking within. And in that confrontation, whether it takes the form of a well-timed punch in a darkened alley or a solitary soul-searching moment on a deserted rooftop, lies the essence of what it means to be alive. A ceaseless struggle between hope and despair, between the desire to reach new heights and the ever-present risk of falling into darkness. So as Peter continues his journey, the legacy of the symbiote remains an ever-present reminder that his battles will never truly be fought on the streets alone. They will be fought in every heartbeat, in every flicker of doubt, in every whispered temptation of power that echoes from deep within. It is a story of cosmic design, of a force that traverses time and space, challenging its hosts to rise above their limitations or succumb under the weight of their own insatiable yearnings. And in that eternal struggle lies the profound truth that every hero, no matter how seemingly invincible, is ultimately defined not by the powers they wield, but by the strength with which they confront the darkness within themselves. In the final analysis, the tale of the symbiote is a chronicle of contrasts, a narrative that refuses to allow neat resolutions or simple dichotomies. Here, the line between creation and destruction is blurred, and the forces of light and shadow merge into a single turbulent current. It is a journey that unfolds slowly over time, each step marked by moments of profound introspection and unexpected twists, where allies become adversaries and every victory is tempered by the cost paid in the currency of one's soul. As the saga weaves through the tapestry of Peter's life, there lies an undeniable truth. The symbiote's dark purpose was always an invitation, a call to confront the latent depths of human nature. It was a mirror held up to the face of ambition, a challenge to every heartbeat that dared to dream beyond the confines of mortal limitations. And in that mirror, Peter Parker found not just a reflection of his current self, but also a glimpse of what he might become if he allowed the seductive whisper of power to override the delicate symphony of heart, mind, and spirit. Thus, the intertwined stories of Peter and Eddie, the light and the dark, become emblematic of a far greater cosmic drama, a saga of choices for which there is no simple answer, only the eternal quest to reconcile the brilliance of a hero with the inevitable pull of the abyss. In every leap from a building, every clash with a formidable foe, lies the echo of an ancient and unyielding question. Can one harness the immense power bestowed by fate without losing the very soul that makes them human? And as the pages of this legend continue to be written with the ink of both triumph and sorrow, the true intentions of the symbiote remain a haunting reminder that every great gift carries with it the seed of its own undoing. In the end, the story is not finished with a single decisive battle or a well-timed epiphany. Instead, it is an ongoing saga, a continuous test of will and spirit, carefully setting each host on a path where destiny and choice converge. Peter's journey, with all its moments of heroic brilliance and heartbreaking vulnerability, stands as a testament to the enduring complexity of being human. The symbiote's dark, malevolent plans are as much a part of this story as the light that propels him forward, creating an intricate dance of contradictions that is as compelling as it is tragic. And so the tale lives on, a narrative carried forth on the winds of destiny, whispered in the quiet moments between chaos and calm, and etched forever in the annals of a hero's life. The symbiote, with its timeless hunger and insidious charm, continues to shape and challenge every soul it touches, leaving behind a legacy that is as darkly compelling as the hero it seeks to define. In that legacy lies the crux of Spider-Man's enduring mystery, a story where every act of courage is counterweighted by the threat of inner darkness, and where the true battle is fought not just against the forces that threaten the city, but against the unyielding tide of temptation that flows from the depths of one's own heart. This is the story of the symbiote, a tale written in the stars and echoed in the rustle of city streets, a constantly unfolding saga of ambition, sacrifice, redemption, and the eternal struggle between the divine light of hope and the ever-encroaching darkness that seeks to claim even the brightest hero. Theory number 2. What if Uncle Ben had survived? In a quiet neighborhood in Queens, the soft hum of daily life once masked the shadow of fate that was about to redefine the lives of those within its embrace. The story begins in a humble home where laughter mingled with the aroma of home-cooked meals. Uncle Ben, known for his unassuming wisdom and steady morality, was the guiding light in Peter Parker's young life. The memory of that fateful night, the night that forever changed the course of Peter's future, has been etched into the hearts of fans and readers alike. But what if the script of destiny had taken a different twist? What if Uncle Ben had, by some twist of fate, survived that fateful encounter? As we embark on this narrative journey, imagine a world in which the values instilled by Uncle Ben were continuously present, subtly altering the paths of those around him. It all began on an ordinary afternoon in the neighborhood. The sun trickled through the leaves of the old oak trees, casting dappled shadows on the sidewalk where Uncle Ben strolled in his worn-out shoes, humming a familiar tune. Young Peter Parker, ever curious and full of dreams even at that age, watched his uncle from a short distance. Back then, Uncle Ben was not just a guardian, but a mentor, whose stories were filled with gentle wisdom and heartfelt lessons about duty, kindness, and the importance of doing what was right. In this alternate timeline, we see events shifting like delicate ripples on a pond. The infamous robbery that in the canonical narrative led to tragedy now becomes a moment filled with uncertainty rather than irrevocable loss. That fateful night, as fate would have it, unfolded differently. Instead of succumbing to the cruelty of chance, as history would have it, Uncle Ben found himself in a twist of events that enabled him to evade death. In a narrow alley behind a local hardware store, danger lurked as a desperate criminal, driven by need and circumstance, found himself cornering Uncle Ben. Yet, thanks to a mix of uncanny luck and an inner strength born from his unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity, Ben escaped fatal harm. As the assailant fled, ghost-like desperation replaced anger, leaving Ben shaken but resolute. The encounter would forever be etched in his memory, a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of hope. In the days that followed, Uncle Ben bore the invisible scars of that encounter. He took extra care to counsel Peter on the gravity of choices, emphasizing that every decision carried weight. Yet in this variant universe, the undeniable presence of Uncle Ben meant that Peter's journey into becoming Spider-Man was embarked upon with a continued support system that guided him with love and wisdom. With Uncle Ben surviving, Peter's character development evolved in subtle yet powerful ways. Instead of being fueled solely by remorse and guilt over a tragic loss, Peter's tale became one interwoven with moments of shared laughter, tension, and mutual discovery. Uncle Ben's survival opened up a new realm of possibility, where mentorship was not abruptly severed, but carried forward, molding Peter's heroism with layered nuances. The days gently transformed into weeks during which Uncle Ben became an active participant in Peter's inner transformation. While his canonical death had served as the embodiment of the cost of responsibility, sparking the motto, "With great power comes great responsibility," the existence of Uncle Ben in this narrative imparted lessons that were softer yet deeply compelling. In nostalgic recollections by Peter, the memory of his uncle's survival fundamentally reassured him. Even in the face of darkness, the light of love, compassion, and sacrifice endures. Their home echoed with thoughtful conversations late into the night. Beneath the old dim lampstand, as the two sat by the worn fireplace, Uncle Ben would recount stories of his youth, a life full of mistakes, triumphs, and ultimate redemption, which in turn emboldened Peter's spirit to confront the challenges ahead. Peter's early days, still as Peter Parker but now buoyed by his close connection to Uncle Ben, soon began to pivot toward a destiny shrouded in duality. He balanced the everyday trials of high school life, a medley of friendships, rivalries, and burgeoning romances, with the clandestine transformation into Spider-Man. His costume, painstakingly crafted with every ounce of youthful exuberance and scientific innovation, soon became a symbol not only of a burden borne but of a promise renewed. The resilience instilled by Uncle Ben's continued presence offered Peter strength to persevere even when the world around him seemed intimidating. As Peter's powers awakened, so too did the ripple effect that changed the contours of his relationships with other key figures in his world. Aunt May, a kind soul who had stood by him like a pillar of strength, now found herself sharing the home with Uncle Ben, a man whose survival lent a balance between caution and warmth. The dynamics within the family evolved over time as Uncle Ben and Aunt May came to a mutual understanding, each with their own scars and hopes for Peter's future. Their combined counsel created a nurturing environment that contrasted sharply with the grim solitude that might have enveloped Peter had his uncle been absent. Peter's transformation into Spider-Man, while keeping many of the same core themes, now bore the hallmark of a hero inspired by first-hand lessons rather than posthumous guilt. In one memorable chapter of his youth, Peter encountered a situation where the lessons his uncle had imparted on him were put to the test, where a fraught encounter with a group of street bullies led to a profound realization about mercy, strength, and the responsibility to protect those who cannot defend themselves. As the bullies encircled him, Peter remembered Ben's gentle advice on mercy and justice. Instead of unleashing overwhelming fury with his newfound powers, he carefully subdued the aggressors, each move laced with compassion, echoing Uncle Ben's teachings. This incident, recounted later in intimate conversation between Peter and Uncle Ben while sitting quietly on the steps of their modest home, became a recurring tale, a fable that established Peter's ethos as a hero whose strength was balanced with empathy. Within the bustling chaos of New York City, the tension between personal relationships and the rising tide of threats emerged as a repeated motif. The lingering presence of Uncle Ben allowed Peter to experiment with an entirely different narrative, a journey not built upon the weight of a killer's echo, but the possibility of redemption through love and human connection. College life beckoned Peter as he matured beyond high school, and during these formative years, Uncle Ben's survival provided a stable anchor amidst the relentless pace of change. In one incident, while attending a student art exhibit in a quiet corner of the city, Peter found himself drawn into a conversation with a renowned professor of ethics. The professor, recognizing the intensity in Peter's eyes, a resolve that came from overcoming a personal trial, drew attention to the importance of the choices we make. The professor noted that while tragedy often guides the quest for moral clarity, sometimes it is the everyday moments of love and perseverance that truly define us. Peter, with Uncle Ben's words resonating in his heart, internalized this wisdom, weaving it into his dual existence as a college student and a masked vigilante. Intricate threads of destiny further entwined when Peter encountered Mary Jane Watson in yet another unexpected twist. In this parallel universe, Mary Jane, a radiant spirit with a heart that yearned for authenticity and genuine connection, crossed Peter's path at a local cafe where discussions about art, literature, and life's unpredictable nature flowed effortlessly between them. Peter's life, enriched by the active guidance of Uncle Ben, was marked by moments that were less about the weight of loss and more about the journey towards understanding one's potential. Their burgeoning relationship was peppered with vivid moments where Peter would reminisce about his uncle's teachings over cups of steaming coffee. Mary Jane was fascinated by Peter's deep sense of responsibility, a quality that he credited largely to the man who had survived so miraculously that fateful night. In several sincere discourses, Peter recounted the events leading to that eventful moment in which destiny had intervened to spare Uncle Ben's life, transforming it from a footnote of sorrow into a catalyst for growth and exploration. As the narrative unfolds in the bustling streets of New York, the alternate storyline begins to reveal its profound impact on the entire fabric of the Spider-Man mythos. In the absence of a tragic moment that typically serves as a catalyst for Peter's transformation, the story took on a dual nature. The wisdom imparted by Uncle Ben became a recurring motif in not only Peter's personal evolution, but in the subtle interplay between fate and self-determination seen in the evolving comics. Long-forgotten panels in old comic books chronicled similar divergences, tales where the accidental preservation of a crucial figure led to the creation of a hero who was as empathetic as he was formidable. In this version of events, Peter's inner turmoil gave way to a tempered action, where each heroic deed was both a tribute to his uncle's undying spirit and a declaration of the life they could create together. This divergence also rippled outward to influence Peter's relationships with his foes. In the canonical series, infamous adversaries such as the Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus were often consumed by their own tragic losses or broken dreams, mirroring Peter's journey. But in this alternate narrative, Uncle Ben's continuous voice of guidance indirectly tempered Peter's confrontations. For instance, in a fateful encounter with a formidable foe, Spider-Man found himself in a moral quandary. Was it possible to subdue a villain without stripping away his humanity? The memory of Uncle Ben's gentle admonitions rang in his ear. As he danced gracefully among rooftops under the cloak of night, Peter's mind retraced countless lessons. The idea that even in moments of conflict, one must find the balance between justice and mercy. This internal monologue was not a mere echo of regret, but a symphony of learned compassion. As the villain taunted him with bitter words, Spider-Man's retort was laced with the confidence of one who was never left alone to bear the weight of responsibility or of loss. The evolution of Peter into Spider-Man took on a narrative richness that allowed for spontaneous bursts of humor, reflective moments, and unexpected heartbreaks. It was a journey where every challenge was counted not only in the light of impending villainy, but as an exploration of what it meant to be human. In one particularly stirring episode, Peter found himself in a tangled web of decisions when a close friend was inadvertently pulled into a criminal conspiracy. The emotional intensity of the situation was magnified by his internal dialogue. Each piece of advice from Uncle Ben, each gentle admonishment from Aunt May, and every memory of shared laughter became guiding lights. Peter struggled to reconcile his responsibilities as a friend, as a student, and as Spider-Man was a testament to the enduring impact of a single man's survival. The narrative vividly detailed every step of his journey, from the dark alley of doubt to the sunlit plazas of redemption, illustrating that sometimes the legacy of love is the greatest power of all. Slowly but steadily, Peter's heroic endeavors began to carve out a narrative that was simultaneously nostalgic and revolutionary. The continuous presence of Uncle Ben provided a counterbalance to the aggressive demands of his double life. Where once there had been a passionate desire for vengeance fueled by heart-wrenching loss, a softer, more reflective demeanor began to emerge. In late-night conversations on the rooftop of an old building, Peter would often speak aloud to the memory of his uncle, recounting the lessons learned from each close call with danger. These moments of solitude and reflection underscored a new approach to heroism, one built on mindfulness, respect for life, and an unwavering belief in the potential for redemption. Peter's internal narrative evolved as the city itself became a vibrant backdrop to his ongoing struggles. The echoing sirens, the murmur of late-night diners, and the distant hum of urban hustle all worked together to create an atmosphere where every hero's journey was a mosaic of challenge and enlightenment. As time flowed on, this delicate tapestry of relationships continued to unravel in unpredictable ways. There came a point when Peter was forced to confront the complexities of his own identity. A chance encounter with an old family friend who was once close to Uncle Ben provided him with insights into the man his uncle had been before his brushes with destiny. Over cups of tea and long, meandering walks through the city's parks, Peter learned stories of a younger Ben, tales of rebellious adventures, of a man who had once doubted the world, only to later embrace a life of quiet dignity and steadfast morality. These narratives, layered with both humor and sorrow, enriched Peter's understanding of the forces that had shaped him. It became clear that the hero he was becoming was not merely a product of extraordinary powers, but of the wisdom, resilience, and unwavering hope passed on to him. In every twist of fate, he recognized that the survival of Uncle Ben was not just a fluke, but a reminder that some legacies are too potent to be extinguished by a single night's misfortune. Throughout the ensuing years, Peter's encounters with danger and allies alike shaped him into a hero defined by integrity and measured action. As his reputation as Spider-Man spread throughout New York City, he became more than just a masked vigilante. He was a beacon of hope, a living testament to the adage that even the darkest moments could be softened by compassion. The signature lesson imparted by Uncle Ben, a mixture of hard-earned wisdom and unconditional love, resonated in every rescue mission, every confrontation with criminality. In a pivotal moment when Peter rescued a group of hostages during a high-stakes bank robbery, he found himself simultaneously wrestling with the moral implications of his actions. His inner voice, rich with the combined teachings of Uncle Ben and Aunt May, urged him to consider the aftermath of every decision. This internal struggle, imbued with a sensitivity that was uniquely Spider-Man, demonstrated that his journey was not defined by the triumph of force, but by the grace with which he navigated the delicate balance of justice. Even in the realm of romance, the survival of Uncle Ben imparted subtle differences. With Mary Jane, Peter discovered that a relationship could be imbued with both the vibrancy of youthful passion and the depth of a slow-burning commitment. Their early encounters were marked by laughter, shared dreams, and the occasional bittersweet moment when the weight of responsibility made its presence known. Mary Jane, always quick to understand the undercurrents of emotion, sensed that Peter's heart was a repository of layered stories. Stories of missed chances, of lessons learned through hardship, and of a steadfast hope that despite life's uncertainties, there was always a path forward. Together, they explored the city hand in hand, often pausing in quiet moments to reminisce about the simple joys that life offered. A shared slice of pizza on a quiet park bench, a tentative smile exchanged in the midst of chaos. A quiet dinner at home where the soft hum of the television played in the background. In these gentle interludes, Peter would recount tales of his Uncle Ben's own youthful escapades, painting a picture of a man who had once been vibrant, flawed, and beautifully human. Mary Jane's eyes would light up as she listened, and for a moment the city around them would fade away, replaced by a shared vision of love that transcended the harsh lines of fate. The ripple effects of Uncle Ben's survival extended beyond Peter's personal relationships, gradually affecting the very fabric of the city's intricate social dynamics. In community centers, local heroes and everyday citizens alike began to draw inspiration from Spider-Man's dual legacy, a legacy that was defined by resilience, compassion, and the belief that even the most tragic events could be transformed into sources of hope. As Spider-Man swung between the towering skyscrapers, his resolve was fueled not by the specter of loss, but by an abiding trust in the power of genuine human connection. A poignant encounter occurred when an elderly man, who had once been a friend of Uncle Ben's, shared stories of past neighborhood festivals and communal gatherings where laughter had masked worry. The man's voice, fogged with the haze of memory, spoke of a time when the unity of the community had been unbreakable, a unity symbolized by Uncle Ben's steadfast presence. Spider-Man listened intently, his heart heavy with the recognition that every life, every touchpoint contributed to the enduring tapestry of his world. As seasons shifted inexorably between the cold bite of winter and the tender bloom of spring, Peter's journey as Spider-Man acquired a reflective cadence. In quiet evenings spent atop silent rooftops beneath the shimmering glow of city lights, he would allow himself vulnerable moments of introspection, moments when he allowed the warmth of Uncle Ben's wisdom to mitigate the cold weight of responsibility. In these reflective interludes, Peter recalled the myriad pieces of advice that had been imparted during long, undistracted walks around the neighborhood. He remembered Uncle Ben's gentle admonitions to always choose the path of kindness even when it seemed fraught with peril, and the story of how a single act of decency had once diffused what could have been an explosive conflict in a nearby community. With every whispered memory, Peter's resolve was renewed, a determination not only to protect those who could not protect themselves, but also to embody the quiet, unyielding strength of someone who had been given a second chance at life. During one tempestuous night, as fierce winds battered the concrete canyons of the city and the skies rumbled with impending rain, an unexpected confrontation with a notorious syndicate tested Spider-Man's newly defined moral compass. In the heart of a derelict warehouse where shadows danced in tandem with flickering lights, the masked hero found himself not in a battle of brute force, but in a tightrope act of negotiation and empathy. The crime lords, hardened by years of exploitation and cruelty, found themselves unaccustomed to a hero who questioned their actions rather than simply overpowering them. As Spider-Man's voice resonated through the cavernous space, he drew on the reservoir of lessons inherited from Uncle Ben, a call for calm, an insistence on seeking reconciliation over retribution. In that charged moment, the undercurrent of hope that Uncle Ben had always championed made its presence felt, humanizing a scenario that might have otherwise devolved into senseless violence. The crime lords, struck by the resolute conviction in Spider-Man's tone, found themselves hesitating, a pause that allowed civil authorities to intervene and ultimately restore balance, demonstrating that a hero could indeed win battles with both his fists and his empathy. The narrative of this alternate universe was further enriched by the subtle interplay of fate and free will. Subsequently, Peter encountered mentors along unexpected paths, wise figures who, much like Uncle Ben, had experienced both the beauty and brutality of life, and who saw in Peter the capacity to change the course of history. One such mentor was an old librarian in a forgotten corner of the city's grand public library. In a scene that unfolded like the turning of a well-worn page, the librarian recounted stories of past heroes and legends from ages gone by, recounting how each of their destinies had been intertwined with a pivotal moment of mercy or an unexpected act of courage. As Peter listened, the librarian's gentle cadence wove together the disparate threads of destiny into a cohesive tapestry, reinforcing the notion that every moment was an opportunity to choose kindness over cruelty. In that quiet space filled with the silent reverence of countless books and untold histories, Peter experienced a renewed clarity, one that reasserted his belief that every life he touched would contribute to the broader narrative of hope and transformation. It is important to note that the evolution of Spider-Man's identity in this reality was as much about the small, everyday miracles as it was about grand heroic feats. On one street corner, amid the chaotic sounds of blaring cars and bustling pedestrians, Peter once encountered a small child whose lost balloon had soared high into the sky. The child's tears, raw and unfiltered, evoked memories of a simpler time when Uncle Ben's gentle humor had lulled him into a state of innocent wonder. In that quiet exchange, Peter realized that heroism was not solely defined by the dramatic rescues from peril, but by the cumulative effect of everyday acts of kindness that restored hope in the hearts of the downtrodden. That moment, simple yet profound, became a recurring anecdote in his personal journal, a chronicle interwoven with the lessons of his past, the echoes of Uncle Ben's voice, and the promise of a future where every small act of goodness could initiate a ripple of change. In the pulse of New York's relentless rhythm, Peter's existence as Spider-Man began to take on a mythic quality, a quality that intertwined the grit of urban reality with the luminous ideals inherited from a surviving mentor. Even as technological advancements and new challenges redefined what it meant to be a hero, the core of Spider-Man's nature remained anchored in that timeless truth: love, responsibility, and unwavering compassion. As the narrative advanced through episodes of personal loss and communal triumph, Peter found himself at the crossroads of destiny, where the sacrifices of his mentors and the ingenuity of his own decisions merged into a symphony of human endeavor. Each encounter, whether with a villain bent on chaos or a vulnerable citizen in desperate need of help, underscored the delicate balance between the forces of darkness and the radiance of hope. The lessons that Uncle Ben had woven into the fabric of Peter's soul continued to illuminate his path, guiding him in moments of indecision and emboldening him in times of despair. The transformative power of Uncle Ben's survival was most palpable during a clandestine meeting in an abandoned subway station, an event that would later be recounted with reverence and hushed tones among Spider-Man's closest confidant. Tensions had escalated as a gang of rogue operatives, intent on destabilizing the already fragile balance of power in the city, launched an assault on a community center that served as a haven for those displaced by urban hardships. It was in this moment of looming chaos that Spider-Man's duality was on full display, a hero who could engage in breathtaking acrobatics and fierce combat, yet who hesitated to lose sight of the humanity in both friend and foe. As he tenderly attended to an injured community leader amidst the chaos, his mind flickered back to scenes of quiet wisdom shared over simple meals. The recollection of Uncle Ben's soft yet insistent voice, urging him to always consider the potential for good even in the midst of corruption, lent him the clarity to diffuse the situation without unnecessary bloodshed. By the end of that night, as emergency vehicles converged on the scene in a symphony of flashing lights and wailing sirens, Spider-Man had not only preserved lives but had also restored the community's belief in the power of empathy. Reflecting upon the broader implications of this alternate storyline, one cannot help but marvel at the intricate dance between fate, choice, and the enduring legacy of mentorship. The survival of Uncle Ben was not simply about the avoidance of untimely death. It was about preserving a philosophical foundation upon which a hero's identity was built. In quiet moments of introspection, Peter would often recall how his uncle's presence had turned ordinary life into an odyssey, a continuous journey where each small decision contributed to the overarching narrative of a city, a community, and ultimately, a world in dire need of hope. It became evident that the tragedy which had defined the canonical Spider-Man was only one of many paths available in the labyrinth of destiny. And in the world where Uncle Ben survived, every step Peter took underlined a critical truth: that life, replete with its labyrinth of joys and sorrows, was something to be cherished and guided by unwavering moral determination. As years turned into decades and the urban landscape evolved with the relentless march of progress, the legacy of Spider-Man and of Uncle Ben's unyielding influence continued to shape the contours of a metropolis that was as unpredictable as it was vibrant. In quieter times, when the clamor of daily life subsided, Peter found solace in strolling through the streets of his youth. The familiar clatter of a street vendor, the distant hum of a city bus, and the soft murmur of conversations in crowded cafes all coalesced into a reminder that amidst the cacophony of modern existence, the lessons of the past remained indispensable. In one evocative scene, Peter revisited the modest apartment that had once been the epicenter of his early growth. There, amidst faded photographs and remnants of long-gone conversations, he found a notebook carefully preserved by Aunt May, a notebook filled with Uncle Ben's reflections on life, care, and the art of being human. Reading those words by the light of a setting sun, Peter experienced an overwhelming rush of gratitude for a man who had not only survived a moment of crisis, but had become the cornerstone of a legacy built on hope, resilience, and unwavering conviction. The narrative of Uncle Ben's survival, when viewed through the lens of time, was more than an alternate storyline. It was a reimagining of the essence of heroism itself. In every interaction, whether with a petty criminal on the fringes of society or a high-flying executive on the summit of corporate power, Spider-Man's actions were imbued with the quiet dignity of a man who had been taught to value life above all else. His approach to conflict was analytical, thoughtful, and imbued with the compassion that comes from a lifetime of shared experiences and lessons passed down through generations. Each swing between the towering edifices, each graceful maneuver through the labyrinthine streets, was an act of rebellion not just against criminality, but against the notion that fate was preordained. Instead, in this reimagined world, destiny was a malleable force, one that could be shaped by the cumulative power of human possibility. Throughout this long and meandering tale, one of the most compelling aspects of the narrative was the tension between prophecy and choice. In countless conversations with friends and adversaries alike, Peter would speak not only of the burdens of his newfound identity, but of the beauty of being allowed to choose his own destiny. This philosophy was perhaps most clearly articulated during an impromptu gathering at a local community hall, a meeting that brought together individuals from all walks of life, unified by the common belief that change could be nurtured through small, deliberate actions. Surrounded by earnest faces and hopeful eyes, Spider-Man recounted the story of that night in the alley, where Uncle Ben had narrowly escaped a tragic end. Each word fell like a gentle bell in the stillness of the room, affirming the belief that survival, not tragedy, could be the catalyst for exponential growth. Listeners, many of whom had grown up with their own tales of loss and regret, found themselves inspired by a narrative that offered a different kind of hope. A hope that even in the most tenuous moments, the spirit of compassion could triumph over fate. The cumulative impact of Uncle Ben's continuous presence in Peter's life also extended into the realm of introspection and personal identity. As Peter's persona evolved from a self-doubting teenager into a confident yet thoughtful adult, the guiding principles of his upbringing became more pronounced. During a poignant reenactment of events in a cozy, dimly lit room filled with relics of the past, Peter recounted to a trusted confidant the intricate interplay between survival and legacy. He described how each lesson from Uncle Ben became a thread woven into the fabric of his soul, a tapestry that was at once delicate and indestructible. In particular, Peter's reminiscences of evenings spent in quiet conversation, discussions about honor, sacrifice, and the unyielding nature of moral truth, offered an intimate look into a hero who was not defined solely by his physical prowess, but by the strength of his character. The narrative, rich with the warmth of memory and the bittersweet undertones of what might have been, resonated with listeners far beyond the immediate circle of those present that night. Even as the story of Spider-Man became intertwined with modern technology, social media, and the frenetic pace of contemporary life, the enduring legacy of Uncle Ben served as a counterbalance, a reminder that some values were timeless. In one notable episode that later became the focus of community discussions, Spider-Man found himself reflecting on the dissonance between digital fame and tangible human connection. Through live streams and viral videos, his image as a hero spread across the vast expanse of cyberspace. Yet in the quiet moments away from the glare of screens, he felt the profound absence of those simple, meaningful interactions that had characterized his youth. It was during one such reflective pause, a solitary walk along an old tree-lined boulevard, that he happened upon an elderly neighbor who recounted a story of a long-ago neighborhood gathering where Uncle Ben's laughter had filled the air. That memory, so steeped in warmth and nostalgia, reawakened Peter's appreciation for traditions and for the timeless values of empathy and community. In the quiet interplay of past and present, he resolved that no matter how fast the world changed, the lessons etched in his heart would remain immutable. As the story unfolds over the span of decades, the evolution of Spider-Man's journey in this reimagined universe becomes not just a tale of heroism, but a profound meditation on the nature of legacy, identity, and the inexorable passage of time. In countless quieter moments, whether during a heartfelt conversation on a park bench, a solitary reflection during early morning walks through misty streets, or even in the simple act of tending to a small garden window, Peter was continuously reminded of the transformative influence of Uncle Ben's survival. Every act of kindness, every measured turn in the pursuit of justice, and every reconciliation with adversaries was imbued with the quiet dignity of a man who had lived and learned the true meaning of sacrifice and hope. In modern retellings passed down through community folklore and reprinted in the yellowed pages of vintage comic books, the narrative of Uncle Ben's survival took on an almost sacred quality. It was a story whispered in classrooms, discussed in literary salons, and debated enthusiastically by fans who saw in it a reflection of their own hopes for a kinder, gentler world. This narrative was not without its critics. However, some questioned whether the absence of that pivotal tragedy diluted the very essence of Spider-Man's identity, arguing that loss served as an essential crucible in forging a hero's resolve. But for those who had experienced the story firsthand, it was clear that the survival of Uncle Ben had transformed tragedy into opportunity, a chance to explore the beauty of life's endless possibilities, and to reimagine heroism as a journey defined by light as much as by darkness. Over the years, Peter's reflections on what might have been morphed into philosophical meditations, shared with spirited academicians and amid rooftop debates with fellow heroes. There was a time when, after a particularly ferocious confrontation with an enemy believed to symbolize the dark aspects of human ambition, Peter sought solace on a quiet balcony overlooking the sprawling cityscape. There, under the vast expanse of starlit skies, he recalled a memory that was as vivid as it was tender. Uncle Ben quietly imparting that even in the depths of Sears, there existed the seed of hope, a hope that if nurtured with love and responsibility would one day blossom into redemption. That recollection, seemingly a fragment of a long-forgotten conversation, resonated deeply within him. In its gentle cadence, Peter found the strength to renew his commitment to a life of service, a life where every setback was met with the courage to rise again, and every act of heroism was both an homage to the past and a promise for the future. In the rich tapestry of this alternate universe, every chapter of Spider-Man's saga was a mosaic of vivid, cathartic moments. From the audacious leaps across towering buildings to the quiet, introspective walks down shadowed alleyways, the ever-present guidance of Uncle Ben was a beacon that illuminated the path ahead. His survival resulted in a narrative that was both deeply personal and actively communal, a story that celebrated the quiet triumphs of everyday humanity, while challenging the very notion of destiny as an unchangeable decree. In this reimagined timeline, the struggle between good and evil was not merely fought on the battlegrounds of physical conflict, but in the intimate corridors of the heart where every choice contributed to the unfolding narrative of hope. As the years progressed, Peter's influence began to ripple outward, touching countless lives in ways that transcended the expected drama of superhero exploits. In hospital corridors, behind the steady cadence of life-saving machines and whispered prayers, patients whispered tales of the mysterious figure who had once visited their bedside, stories of a gentle, compassionate figure who reminded them that life was worth every struggle and every triumph. In classrooms, teachers invoked the legend of Spider-Man not as a tale of revenge or despair, but as a parable of responsibility, sacrifice, and the enduring power of familial bonds. And in the quiet recesses of the city's forgotten corners, where hope was often overshadowed by despair, the memory of Uncle Ben's survival served as a quiet reminder that even in the deepest gloom, the promise of a new dawn was never entirely extinguished. By now, the narrative had woven itself into an intricate chronicle, a sprawling epic that chronicled not only the evolution of a hero, but also the metamorphosis of an entire city. Every conversation, every rescue, and every quiet moment beneath a starry sky was a verse in this grand hymn of hope. And as Spider-Man swung across the urban canyons, his silhouette framed against the rising or setting sun, he carried with him the indomitable spirit of a man whose survival was a metaphor for the resilience of the human soul. The streets of New York, with all their scars and stories, became a living canvas. Each mural, each crack in the sidewalk, a testament to the trials and triumphs that had forged the unbreakable link between fate and free will. In the quiet aftermath of moments that had tested the limits of his strength, Peter would often return to the simple truth that his very existence was a mosaic of innumerable choices that had been made with the benefit of guidance, love, and the ever-present memory of Uncle Ben. His heroism was not measured solely by the physicality of his feats, but by the emotional depth, that each encounter carried. Whether he was negotiating peace between warring factions of vigilantes, comforting a grieving mother in the wake of a personal loss, or simply sharing a silent moment of understanding with Aunt May over a cup of tea, every action was imbued with a tenderness that echoed the quiet lessons of his past. Over time, as technology evolved and the city's pulse quickened with the cadence of modernity, Spider-Man's narrative became a bridge across generations, a living reminder that some values, once instilled, transcended the ephemeral trends of the day. In interviews with emerging journalists and impassioned young fans at community events, Peter would recount, with a soft smile and reflective eyes, the timeless lessons imparted by Uncle Ben. He spoke of a world where, instead of being marked by a single catastrophic moment, every day was an opportunity to choose compassion over cruelty, to choose integrity over expedience. His words, filled with sincerity and the gravitas of lived experience, resonated deeply, sparking discussions in classrooms, inspiring debates among academics, and igniting the hearts of those who believed that the essence of heroism lay not in grandiose displays of power, but in quiet acts of unyielding love. In the culmination of this vast narrative, as Peter's journey unfolded like an epic saga painted across the canvas of time, the survival of Uncle Ben emerged, not as an isolated twist of fate, but as the symbol of an enduring legacy. It was a testament to the endless possibilities that emerged when love and responsibility intertwined, a reminder that sometimes the simplest of miracles could alter the trajectory of countless lives. The narrative, sprawling yet intimate, forced both hero and audience alike to confront the perennial question, what would it mean to truly live, if not with the guiding light of those who believed in the inherent goodness of humanity? As the chapters of Spider-Man's life continued to be written, each page carried the weight of this truth, a truth that rose above the clamor of urban chaos and resonated in the gentle rustle of leaves, in the soft whispers of bygone conversation. In every daring rescue and every quiet moment of introspection, the living memory of Uncle Ben's survival endured. It was a legacy too potent to be diminished by tragedy, a living testament that even when fate seems poised against us, the human spirit nurtured by unwavering love and timeless lessons can transform darkness into a radiant beacon of hope. In the final tapestry of this remarkable journey, Peter's evolution into Spider-Man, a journey marked by both staggering challenges and quiet triumphs, became a narrative rich with possibility and infused with the indelible spirit of a man who had survived. And as the city lights shimmered against the backdrop of night, a gentle reminder echoed through the alleys and rooftops that in a world filled with endless twists of fate, the survival of one gentle soul could inspire countless others to choose love over despair, hope over fear, and responsibility over indifference. This is the story of a hero reborn out of a pivotal divergence in destiny, a story where the survival of Uncle Ben was not merely an act of chance, but a catalyst for a journey that redefined not only Spider-Man's path, but the very essence of what it means to be human. In this narrative, every moment was suspended between the weight of legacy and the promise of tomorrow, a beautiful, intricate mosaic of decisions, dreams, and the enduring power of love that transformed tragedy into a timeless legacy. And as the years continued to unfold, as new generations discovered the magic of a hero who balanced the scales of responsibility with gentle compassion, the memory of Uncle Ben's survival stood as a living beacon. It was a reminder that heroes are not forged solely in the crucible of loss, but in the quiet, persistent strength that arises when one chooses to embrace life with an open heart. Through his many adventures atop skyscrapers, in quiet alleyways, and in the intimate moments of shared human connection, Spider-Man carried the torch of a legacy rooted in wisdom, nurtured by love, and illuminated by the enduring spirit of a man who had forever shaped his soul. In the echo of every whispered memory, every brush with destiny, and every act of courage that lit up the darkened streets of New York, the story whispered its timeless message, that even in the face of the unpredictable chaos of fate, the light of compassion and responsibility never truly fades. And so, as Peter Parker, ever the humble hero, continued to swing between the realms of ordinary life and extraordinary adventure, the survival of Uncle Ben remained the bedrock of a legacy that would forever inspire, guide, and illuminate the path for all those who believed that, in every heart, there existed the power to transform tragedy into hope, and fate into a future of endless possibility. Thus, as the sun set over the city one quiet evening, and the silhouettes of skyscrapers merged with the fading light, the hero's journey carried on, a journey where every decision, every act of kindness, and every flicker of compassion was a step towards a future where the delicate balance between destiny and free will shone as brightly as a beacon in the night. This is the reimagined tale of Spider-Man, where the survival of Uncle Ben was not only an alternative path in a universe of infinite possibilities, but a living, breathing testament to the enduring truth that love and responsibility are the truest sources of heroism. And so, within this vast narrative, woven together with the threads of memory, compassion, and the unyielding human spirit, the legend of Spider-Man continued to evolve into something much more than a story of tragedy transformed. It became a tale of hope, resilience, and the infinite potential that lies in every heart. A tale that whispered to each and every one of us that in even the darkest of times, there is always the promise of a new dawn, nurtured by the warm glow of love and the enduring legacy of those who believed in the better angels of our nature. This, then, is not just the story of a superhero, but the saga of a living legacy, a legacy where every leap across the city's skyline, every tender moment shared in quiet corners of life, and every brush with destiny was a step towards crafting a future where the shining light of compassion, ignited by the survival of Uncle Ben, would forever guide the way. Theory number 3. Spider-Man's 6 arms. Spider-Man's world has always been one of unexpected twists and extraordinary changes. And none are as startling as the tale of the mutation that granted Peter Parker not 2, but 6 arms. It wasn't a chapter that began with a bang, but with a subtle shift. A change in the balance of what his powers could truly mean. It started on a seemingly ordinary day in Queens, where Peter was rehearsing his latest acrobatic routine on a rooftop, testing the limits of his strength and agility as he swung between buildings. Yet, even as he moved with the precision only a spider-inspired hero could muster, something in the back of his mind whispered of a lingering possibility, a change that might redefine his very nature. In the days following a harrowing encounter with a new mysterious strain of radiation during an experimental exhibit at a cutting-edge scientific facility, Peter began noticing subtle differences. At first, it was a strange feeling in his extremities after a long night of web-slinging. The corridors of his mind, once filled with clear-cut thoughts of responsibility and duty, became cluttered with fleeting images of change and power. Over time, the sensations grew stronger, and so did the changes in his body. His muscles, which had once been taut with controlled energy, began to throb with the promise of something more. It was as if the very essence of his being was being rewritten. The boundaries between man and myth were dissolving. Late one chilly autumn evening, when the city lights flickered uncertainly against a darkening sky, Peter stood before a cracked mirror in his modest apartment. The reflection that greeted him was both familiar and alien. An extra pair of arms had begun to bud along his side. Their essence was subtle at first, like faint outlines beneath his skin. But each passing day, the outlines became more defined, more robust. In the solitude of that tiny room, Peter was startled not by fears about the mutation, about losing himself to something so fundamentally different from who he had been. Mary Jane's gentle reassurances were a beacon in his tumultuous world, reminding him that identity was not dictated solely by appearance, but by the choices one made in the face of adversity. Their conversations, whispered in the quiet after midnight, served as a grounding force, an anchor amidst the swirling uncertainty of a rapidly evolving life. Even as Peter navigated the storm within, larger narrative threads began to weave themselves into the fabric of the city. In one memorable account, a group of vigilantes known as the Midnight Watchers emerged, individuals who had been inspired in part by the enigmatic stories surrounding Spider-Man's transformation. They weren't naive idealists. They were hardened by the city's relentless pace and by its ceaseless struggle against corruption. These Watchers, armed with makeshift gear and a reckless determination, sought to emulate the hero they believed was destined to usher in a new era. Their initial admiration, however, soon soured into a dangerous form of fanaticism. In the labyrinthine backstreets and forgotten corners of New York, these vigilantes clashed with not only petty criminals but also with the official law enforcement units, whose trust in Spider-Man was being compromised by uncontrolled mini-revolutions. In one particular standoff on an overpass above the murmuring Hudson, Peter encountered a group of these Watchers. They believed that the 6 arms symbolized more than physical might. They represented a divine mandate to lead the struggle against oppression. With every blow and every web shot that night, the clash became a metaphorical battle between wild idealism and tempered responsibility. Peter's 6 arms, each moving with a carefully honed precision, were a stark counterpoint to the clumsy zeal of those who had lost sight of reason. In the echoes of that confrontation, The city was reminded that transformation, no matter how miraculous, required discipline, wisdom, and an unyielding commitment to justice. As the months turned into years, Peter's mutation began to reveal its subtle layers. The additional arms, which once were a source of hesitation and physical discord, gradually blended into a seamless part of his abilities. In quieter moments, when the moon hung low over a sleeping city, Peter would traverse rooftops with a grace that belied the complexity of his form. He learned to calculate the trajectory of each limb, to move in a way that leveraged the surprising strength of a six-armed body. It was during these moments of solitude that he discovered the full spectrum of his new abilities. He could simultaneously dodge projectiles, fire intricate webs in multiple directions, and even carry individuals to safety with a speed and precision that felt almost superhuman. Yet, with these newfound abilities came unexpected challenges. Each extra arm demanded not only physical energy but a deeper mental focus. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the city was at its most vulnerable, Peter would sit in meditation in his modest apartment. Amid the soft rustling of the wind through the broken windows, he would allow his mind to sync with the rhythmic beat of his mutated heart and limbs. This meditative ritual became as essential as any training exercise, a way to harness the chaos of newfound power into a steady, controlled force for good. Amidst these internal battles and physical adjustments, another significant chapter unfolded that would forever alter his course. An encounter with a mentor whose own journey through transformation served as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale. It happened on a cold winter evening when Peter, weary from a long night of patrolling the city's darkest corners, stumbled upon an enigmatic figure known simply as Elias. Elias was a retired hero, one who had once donned a mask and fought against the tide of encroaching darkness, but whose own body had borne the scars of too many battles. Meeting by chance in a sleepy corner of an old library, Elias recognized in Peter a mirror of his former self, a spark of defiance amid overwhelming change. Over cups of bitter coffee and hushed conversation, Elias recounted his own experiences with unexpected mutations, inflicted by long-forgotten experiments and battles with rogue scientists. He spoke of the dangerous allure of unchecked power, of the moments when mortality and madness danced a precarious tango in the heart of a hero. His words were measured but weighty, filled with the wisdom of a man who had seen too much and lost too many friends along the way. Elias warned Peter that while extraordinary strength could offer unprecedented opportunities for heroism, it also carried the risk of alienating him from those he sought to protect. His caution was not a call to abandon this new path, but rather a reminder that every mutation, every physical change must be tempered by humility and integrity. Those conversations with Elias resonated deeply with Peter, solidifying his resolve to integrate his mutation in a way that was both respectful to his legacy and adaptive to the demands of his evolving role. Throughout this period, another dimension of Peter's transformation began to emerge that had little to do solely with physical prowess. His mind, continually adapting to the new neurological demands of a body with 6 arms, started to function in innovative ways. Tasks that once required deliberate calculation became almost intuitive. He found that even in the heat of the thickest brawls, his thoughts split seamlessly between complex strategies and split-second decisions, an ability that allowed him to take on more than one foe at a time, with brilliant tactical precision. Stories of his exploits spread far and wide. In one dramatic episode that would soon become urban legend, Spider-Man was reported to have thwarted an audacious bank heist in broad daylight. With 2 extra arms, Peter manipulated multiple ropes and pulleys simultaneously, swinging into the bank at the precise moment the robbers were trying to crack the safe. In a blur of motion and calculated precision, he incapacitated the entire crew before they even knew what hit them. Overhead, reporters marveled at this incredible feat, describing it as a perfectly choreographed dance of limbs and webs, a testament to the evolution of a hero who refused to be defined by limits. As the city admitted and slowly embraced this new chapter of Spider-Man's journey, hints of alternative narratives began to surface. In the sprawling magazines, online forums, and hushed chats among comic enthusiasts, theories abounded. Many speculated that this mutation, this seemingly bizarre alteration, was not a freak accident, but part of a larger cosmic design, a hint that the universe was gearing up for an evolution in heroism itself. There were tales spun of an ancient prophecy, woven into the very mythology of New York City, suggesting that when the world faced its darkest hour, a hero with many arms would rise to unite disparate forces against an inevitable onslaught. This narrative found fertile ground among fans of the What If series, where adventurous storylines were given free rein. In those creative spaces, the six-armed Spider-Man was reinvented as a symbol of possibility, a being who accepted change and turned it into a resource for good. These stories, though entirely fictional in their origin, resonated deeply with the public. They were retold in countless variations, each version adding another layer of mystique to the hero's character. Whether it was a tale of cosmic destiny, a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, or a cautionary epic about the fine line between genius and madness, the narrative of Spider-Man's six arms was embraced as a living allegory for a world in flux. The transformation also rippled outwards into Peter's relationships with those around him. Friends and allies who had by now grown accustomed to the unpredictable nature of his powers found themselves rethinking what it meant to rely on a hero who was constantly evolving. His best friend Ned became an indispensable support, a confidant who helped him navigate not only the logistics of his new abilities but also the emotional labyrinth that accompanied such a profound change. On long, quiet walks through the city's parklands, Ned would listen as Peter recounted every detail of his metamorphosis, the agonizing pain, the thrilling moments of control, and the unexpected bursts of power that left him breathless. Their conversations often veered into deep philosophical discussions about identity, fate, and the nature of power itself. These heart-to-heart talks were interwoven with lighter moments of camaraderie, Ned's humorous jabs and playful banter about the perils of having too many arms during a handshake, or the comic mishaps that occurred when trying to enjoy a meal at a crowded diner. Despite the challenges, these interactions reinforced the idea that even in the midst of extreme transformation, human connection remained the cornerstone of his journey. There were times when Peter found solace outside the relentless bustle of New York. He would retreat to quiet hideaways, abandoned warehouses reclaimed by nature, or the soothing isolation of rooftop gardens. In these serene interludes, high above the chaos, he contemplated the legacy of heroes past and the uncertain future that lay ahead. It was during such a reflective evening that he encountered an old street artist known simply as Dante. With paint-splattered overalls and hands stained by years of creativity, Dante saw something extraordinary in Peter's mutated form. He pressed a worn cap into Peter's hand, a gesture that spoke volumes about acceptance and the beauty found in evolution. Over hours of conversation, Dante recounted tales of his own metamorphosis, how art had offered him a refuge during times of personal crisis, and how, by embracing change, he had discovered a talent far beyond his wildest dreams. Dante's words, rich with the warmth of lived experience, reminded Peter that mutation could be seen as a rebirth rather than a curse. It was a transformation that, though painful and disorienting, held the promise of a brighter, more adaptable future. This unexpected encounter ultimately imbued Peter with a renewed sense of purpose, one that transcended the physicality of his condition and ventured into the realm of the soul. In the midst of all these personal trials and victories, the city itself began to take on new dimension. Neighborhoods once steeped in routine and predictability now buzzed with the energy of change. Community centers hosted impromptu discussions about evolution and progress, while local schools invited guest speakers to talk about the scientific possibilities of genetic mutation. One such event took place in a modest auditorium in Brooklyn, where a passionate scientist named Dr. Leona Morales explained the potential real-life applications of controlled mutations and genetic enhancement. Her voice, both authoritative and empathetic, wove a narrative that bridged the gap between cutting-edge research and the world of comic book fantasy. She shared stories of experimental therapies that, much like Spider-Man's transformation, dared to push the boundaries of nature. For many in the audience, her lecture was a call to embrace the unknown, to see beauty in the unpredictable spiral of evolution. The idea that Peter Parker's unpredictable mutation could be seen as a natural progression, a slight deviation from the norm that might, in the long run, benefit humanity, began to take root. That day, as the applause echoed in the auditorium, the six-armed Spider-Man was recast not as a freak of nature but as a herald of a future where biology and science could coexist in a delicate balance of innovation and responsibility. Not every encounter with change was met with open arms, however. In the deeper recesses of the city's underbelly, criminal minds plotted strategies that exploited Spider-Man's new vulnerabilities. A notorious gang leader known as the Ripper, infamous for his Blade Runner-like ruthlessness, began to engineer ambushes aimed at exploiting the momentary lapses in Peter's coordination. In a particularly grim episode, the Ripper organized a series of coordinated attacks during one stormy night. As rain battered the city and thunder reverberated off the skyscrapers, Peter found himself facing an overwhelming onslaught. In that chaotic clash, every moment demanded split-second decisions. His 6 arms, now fully integrated into his combat style, moved with both beauty and brutality. In the midst of the torrential downpour, as electric flashes danced across the night sky, Peter wove intricate networks of webbing that ensnared the attackers. Yet, even as the criminals were subdued, the effort left him exhausted, a stark reminder that extraordinary power always came at a cost. In the third of acts, as emergency crews navigated the slick streets and citizens expressed both admiration and concern for their beloved hero, Peter's introspection deepened. The night was long, filled with a poignant realization that the road ahead was fraught with risks, not just for him, but for every soul in the city whose fate he was sworn to protect. In the wake of such confrontations, Peter began to see parallels between his own transformation and the larger evolutionary currents shaping New York itself. The city, with its mosaic of cultures, its relentless pace, and its inherent resilience, was undergoing a metamorphosis of its own. Stories of urban renewal and the rise of technology converged with traditional narratives of grit and survival. In his nightly patrols, amidst neon lights and shadowed alleyways, Peter observed how the spirit of transformation permeated every corner of the city. An old baker whose family had run a small shop on the Lower East Side for decades embraced modern techniques alongside age-old recipes. A group of young street performers used digital art to reinvent urban legends into interactive experiences that captivated passers-by. Even the homeless, often ignored by the mainstream narrative, carved out spaces of dignity and creativity under fire escapes and park benches. In this confluence of old and new, Peter saw a reflection of his own struggles, a hero adapting to a world that was reinterpreting its traditions in the face of progress. As seasons changed, so too did the narrative of Spider-Man's 6 arms evolve into a complex interplay of symbolism, struggle, and ultimate redemption. There were moments when Peter's mutation became a metaphor, a living testimony to the idea that the essence of heroism was not rooted in perfection, but in the perpetual adaptation to life's challenges. During a quiet afternoon at a community center, an elderly man named Simon recounted his own life story, a narrative of loss, healing, and the unexpected redemptive power of change. Simon's eyes twinkled as he described a moment in his youth when he had been forced to reinvent every part of himself after a terrible accident. His story, filled with the scars of battles both physical and emotional, resonated deeply with Peter. In that room filled with people from all walks of life, the 6-armed Spider-Man was suddenly not just a solitary figure dodging bullets in the rain. He was a symbol of renewal, a reminder that even when fate deals a brutal hand, one can choose to fight back, to evolve, and to triumph over adversity. The connection Peter forged with the people of New York reinforced his belief that every challenge he faced, every moment of transformation, even the agonizing stretches of pain, was a crucible in which his true strength was being forged. In the midst of these broader societal changes, Peter found moments of lightness and connection that helped balance the gravity of his responsibilities. Among these, a particularly memorable episode emerged when he encountered a young street magician named Zara on a bustling summer night along the waterfront. Zara, with her mesmerized audience and quick-handed illusions, drew a parallel between her craft and Peter's very existence. They shared stories of misdirection, of revealing hidden truths beneath apparent chaos. Zara's performance was a blend of art and wonder, and as dusk fell over the harbor, she confided in Peter about her own fears of being forgotten in a world that prized the miraculous over the mundane. For a brief moment, Peter saw himself in her, the struggle to reconcile an extraordinary gift with the desire for ordinary connection. The same deep-seated need to belong that all humans carried regardless of their superhuman potentials. Their exchange, brief as it was, kindled a spark of realization that in every twist of genetic fate or act of magic, there lay the potential to inspire and uplift others who felt invisible before the dawn. It was a vow, softly spoken, that he would continue to use his powers to bring moments of wonder even in the darkest of times. During quieter nights, long after the city's cacophony had settled, Peter would often wander the silent streets, contemplating the duality of his existence. In a reflective monologue, he recalled the early days of his crusade as Spider-Man, when every fight was a leap of faith, when every swing was both a triumph and a test of his resolve. He remembered the exhilaration of discovering new abilities, the fierce pride in defending his city, and the wrenching isolation that often accompanied the burden of greatness. Now, with 6 arms painting the air in a ballet of purpose, His introspection took on a richer hue. Each of his limbs, a physical testament to change, carried the memories of past victories and the scars of costly defeats. The symphony of his actions was more complex than ever, a harmonized blend of precision and adaptiveness that allowed him to see both the immediate and the long-term effects of every decision. With each web that flew into action, with each criminal subdued, Peter stitched together a narrative of resilience, a living tapestry that wove future possibilities with lessons learned from moments of pain and triumph. Time, invariably the quiet arbiter of change, moved forward relentlessly. With the passing of each day, Peter's identity as the six-armed Spider-Man grew less of an anomaly and more of a celebrated evolution. As the scars of the mutation faded into well-worn memory and confidence supplanted the initial trepidation, he forged a deeper connection with his altered self. His extra limbs became as natural to him as the pen in a writer's hand, a distinctive mark of an ongoing journey rather than a permanent blemish. In the lives of those he saved, in the echoes of whispered gratitude, and in the silent nods from fellow New Yorkers who recognized the hero's struggle, the legacy of Spider-Man's transformation found meaning. It was not merely a mutation, but a courageous embrace of the unknown, a decision to step into a role that demanded constant reinvention, and in that relentless cycle of renewal, Peter discovered a profound truth, that true strength comes from accepting change with open arms. Quite literally, and from the courage to forge ahead even when the path is obscured by the shadows of uncertainty. As the narrative continued to unfold, alternate realities began to blur at the edges of Peter's consciousness. In the tapestry of what-if stories that colored the collective imagination of comic enthusiasts, his six-armed form was reimagined time and again. There were tales where, instead of a blessing, the mutation had spiraled into an uncontrollable curse, one where the extra limbs developed minds of their own, each vying for dominance over the others. In those speculative accounts, Peter was torn between his human heart and the relentless logic of the emerging arachnid facets of his nature. These were not just wild fantasies spun by the creative minds of fans, but explorations of identity and the fundamental question of what it meant to be human in an age of rapid change. In one such recounting, Peter encountered another version of himself, a brother from a parallel dimension, who felt that the mutation was something to be eradicated rather than embraced. Their epic clash, fought on the borders of reality and possibility, was as much a battle of ideologies as it was of physical might. In the end, the lesson emerged clearly. Even when faced with the specter of a future driven by technology and uncontrollable evolution, the essence of what made Spider-Man a hero remained unchanged. It was his relentless quest for justice, his compassion for the downtrodden, and his unwavering refusal to let power corrupt his spirit. Standing on the precipice of these endless narratives, Peter's journey was ultimately one of acceptance, a slow, deliberate, and often painful process of reconciling the hero he was expected to be with the man he had become. Each day was a narrative in itself, filled with moments that defied simple categorization. In the heart of the bustling city, amidst the cacophony of different lives intersecting, he was not just a superhero in constant motion. He was a storyteller of resilience, a living myth whose chapters were written not in ink, but in sweat, triumph, and the pain of relentless transformation. Every extra limb, every perfectly timed web shot, every whispered conversation in the dead of night told a story of adaptation. A tale of a man who, despite the odds, embraced change with courage and forged a legacy that would redefine heroism for generations to come. By now, those who watched Spider-Man's exploits had come to see him as more than just a figure in a tight-fitting suit. He was a symbol of hope in a city that was as tumultuous as it was timeless. His six arms became emblematic of not only the strength to face physical adversaries, but of a willingness to face the inner battles that every individual must endure. His story, filled with trials and triumphs, was woven into the collective consciousness of the city, a narrative that echoed in the heartbeat of every New Yorker who had ever dared to dream of a better future. In neighborhoods both affluent and impoverished, where the lines between hero and human blurred, Peter's resilience became a beacon. The extra arms, once a source of inner conflict, were now celebrated as an embodiment of persistent adaptability, the tangible evidence that our capacity for growth, acceptance, and transcendence lies not in the unyielding sameness of what we once were, but in the courageous willingness to evolve. As years turned to decades, the legend of Spider-Man's six arms settled into the annals of urban myth. From whispered bedtime stories to impassioned academic debates on the ethics of genetic mutations, His journey encapsulated the eternal dialogue between tradition and transformation. In every retelling, the narrative morphed just slightly. A new detail added, a subtle twist that captured the imagination of a city ever in flux. Yet at its core, the six-armed Spider-Man was a story of embracing one's destiny, of finding beauty and purpose in the face of relentless chaos. Peter Parker's journey was not merely about a physical mutation, it was about the metamorphosis of spirit. A journey underscored by the belief that even when life presents us with the most unexpected challenges, there lies within every heart the capacity to turn adversity into art and symptom into symphony. So, as the lights of New York twinkled against the coming dusk and the city pulsed with renewed energy, Spider-Man soared overhead, his six arms a blur of motion against the night sky. Every swing, every web, every salvaged soul was a chapter in an ongoing saga, a tale that defied logic and expectation, that celebrated the messy, unpredictable process of growth. And in that perpetual dance between past and future, between the familiar and the extraordinary, the six-armed Spider-Man etched his story into the cosmos, a story of mutation, acceptance, and the unyielding resilience of the human spirit. That was all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. As well as if you have any suggestions for videos, please leave them down below in the comments.